Hey, what's up guys? Mike here. Today we're going to be setting up a new betta fish up here in my office. You can see I've already gotten started here, but it's not going to be just for one betta fish or two betta fishes. You'll see what I'm talking about in a little bit. Let's back up here a little bit though, because I've already gotten started. Let's just talk about this real quick. So this is, I think it's roughly like an 11 or 12 gallon cube aquarium. We have this really nice driftwood in here. I believe this is ADA wood or ironwood or something like that. Got it from a local fish store a long time ago, and I've been waiting a long time to put it to use. We have some construction paper here on the back, which is just held on by this LED clip. This is the ONF flat nano LED. Very similar to what we have over here on the forest aquarium, but you'll notice this one is black and it's app controllable. So I can pull out my phone and I can adjust the brightness with this slider, which is pretty sweet. And I can also come in here and create a daytime cycle mode where it goes through different brightnesses at different points in the day. And we don't need a timer or anything because it's all Bluetooth controlled. And as always guys, I'll have a link for this light and pretty much everything else we're going to be using today down in the description, so you can check those things out if you happen to be interested. But let's go ahead and let's get started here with the tank. So first things first guys, we need to get settled on the hardscape. You can see I've already been playing around with the wood here, and I think I have all of these pieces where I ultimately want them to be, roughly. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start by adding in some substrate. So we have our Brightwell Rio Escuro F. That's the very small fine granule version of this active substrate. We're going to lay our substrate on top of a small layer of this fluorine base. It's a clay additive and it's going to help give our plants a nice source of iron. Once we have that down, then it's time to add that top layer substrate, and then we work it around the wood with our fingers, trying to get a nice distribution, a little bit more in the back relative to the front. Once the substrate's in place, now it's time to get our ironwood, or whatever it's called, held in place. For this, I'm going to be using gel type super glue like I always use, and I'm just going to go around to pretty much every point where a piece of wood is touching another piece of wood and glue it all together. And just to make sure that these wood pieces don't float up, I'm going to find a couple of areas here where the wood is touching the actual glass of the aquarium, and I'm going to put some super glue in between. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a lid for our aquarium. A lot of fish, including betta fish, are going to be prone to jumping, and we do not want to have our fish jump out of this tank. So here I started out with a sheet of polycarbonate, and I had to go through and do a lot of guess and check work and cut out where things were going to be on the aquarium. So the wood sticking up out of the top, you see I have to create some notches for those pieces, as well as the equipment that we have on this tank. That guess and check work ultimately left me with a little bit of an open area here in the front of the tank. This is going to end up working as like a feeding hole, so we don't have to remove this lid every time, but I do want to cover it up. So it turns out that I can take some smaller pieces of wood that we ended up not using in the scape and just place those over that open area. That should prevent any fish from trying to jump out. Now let's talk about our filtration guys. For this build, we are going to be using an Awaza FiltoSmart 60 hang-on back canister filter. This filter is pretty cool. It doesn't have a ton of flow. Betta fish do not want to have a tank that has a lot of water current in it. That's going to bug them. So this filter ends up being perfect. It also has a really nice biological media volume for what we're going to be doing here, because we're going to have multiple fish in here and we're going to be feeding a lot of frozen bloodworms and whatnot. It's always nice to have a little bit extra biological filtration going on. Now we're going to get into the planting of the tank, but first I'm going to go ahead and pour in a little bit of water to soak up the substrate, and then I'm going to take my sprayer here and spray the wood down completely, because we're going to eventually be putting some moss on it. So here we have some Peacock Moss from a few of my tanks downstairs. We're going to go through and we're just going to glue this moss to some select areas of the wood. Again, I'm using the gel type super glue to adhere this moss to the wood rather than using like fishing line, just because that would be super time consuming, and because of the shape of this wood, it wouldn't be the easiest thing to do. The glue is always just a really convenient and handy trick for attaching plants like moss and epiphytes. Before we go ahead and start filling that tank up, guys, I want to add in one more plant, and that's going to be the main filler plant, if you will, in this scape, which is going to be this needle leaf Java Fern. This is probably my favorite plant for filling up areas of an aquascape, and it's just going to go great with the scale. It's going to be perfect for our betta fish. They're going to love swimming in and out of these plants, and so we have 3 of these mats here that came from flipaquatics.com. Because I only have 3 mats and I want a little bit more flexibility, I'm just going to take some scissors and cut these mats into 2. That's going to give me a total of 6 smaller little bunches of this needle leaf Java Fern that I can place around the tank. These mats, even when cut in half, still sink, which is really going to work for us. I'm going to put a couple down sitting right on top of this substrate, and then a few more wedged in between some of the wood structures to add a little bit of flair. As always, guys, don't forget to check the description for my coupons for flipaquatics.com. Save yourself some money on plants, shrimp, and more. I always like to add my stem plants when the tank is full, guys. Everybody's going to have their own way of doing it. So I'm going to fill up the tank here, and then we're going to shoot over to the Rotala macrandra that I've had just floating in one of my tanks downstairs. This is a really nice, easy to grow red stem plant when it gets a lot of light, but these stems, you'll notice that there's a lot of roots growing off the sides, and that's because they were floating in a tank, so we need to pull some of these roots off from the tops of the shoots, and that way everything just looks a little bit better. I pinch off the excess length on some of the stems just so they're all the same height, and then we go ahead and just take about 6 at a time and plant them in the back of the tank. Some of you are probably wondering why we don't have anything in the foreground of this tank yet, and that's basically just because it didn't show up in time and I wasn't quite sure what we were gonna do. We're about to fast forward 12 hours here and you'll see what happens. Okay guys, we're back here at the tank the next day. Let's take a look at it. Let's first get the obvious out of the way. The tannins in this aquarium, the wood overnight has produced a significant amount, and that's why we have such cloudy water right now. I guess it's not so much cloudy as it is just tea-colored, but you know what I'm talking about. Tannins are not a bad thing. This is something that will gradually slow down, and we could have a crystal clear tank if we wanted with a little bit of time, but the tannins are good. They're going to be great for the betta fish. They're going to absolutely love it, and so we might just kind of encourage this. Another thing that I wasn't exactly anticipating was the fact that our polycarbonate lid here has warped a little bit. Not going to be an issue as far as fish being able to get out of it, but it just doesn't look quite as clean as it did initially. Here's a better shot of the Rotala macrandra, or however you say that. So eventually when we step back here and we look at the tank head on, we should be able to see some really nice red plants here growing up at the top, and I think that'll look pretty good. Heating your betta fish tank is also super important, guys, if your tank is not in like a temperature controlled room like mine, okay? So here we have some heaters. These are some really good options. This is an Aquarium flat style heater. I like these. They're pretty good. They're low profile, and you can hide them pretty easily. And over here, we have something new that I haven't ever tried out before. This is made by Siche. They sent me this. It has a super long cord, which I like. I think there's one that's a little bit bigger than this, but same style. That would be more applicable to match the output of this guy right here, but that would also be a really good option. I mean, just hide that in the back. Super low profile. These are both preset heaters, so relative to the amount of gallons of water they're in, they're only going to heat the water up to like 76. If it's less water, then it might go up to 78, and that's kind of where you want a betta fish tank to be, in the upper 70s, if not the low 80s. Let's go ahead and take our lid off here. I also brought up some red root floaters just because I thought, hey, why not? And I think ultimately that could look pretty cool. We don't want a ton of floating plants covering the top of this water, but a few larger ones like this should be okay. Another thing that I'm really happy about is the flow from the Filto Smart 60. Let's tip the output up a little bit here so you can see that we're getting decent flow. I mean, it could always be more, but this is perfect for this tank. Betta fish do not like to have a lot of flow. It's going to bother them. It's not what they're used to in the wild. So this, I think, is going to end up being exactly what they want. So like I mentioned, while we were setting this thing up, the foreground was something that we didn't really have the ability to tackle, and I did a little bit more thinking. We got a tank downstairs that has some hair grass in it. I think we're going to go down there. We're going to pull from that to kind of fill out this foreground a little bit more, and then we might do something with some sand to add a little bit of contrast to the scape. So let's go get those plants first. So here's the hair grass, guys. These are just a bunch of little plugs that I made off of like a big bunch of it that was in a tank downstairs. Break off, you know, 4, 5, 6 individual plants, and then just spin them together in my fingers to make the little plugs. I also grabbed a couple pots of some baby tears. This one's looking a little beat up, but this one looks pretty good. And I'm thinking that plant is going to look good as just kind of an accessory in the background of the tank. This baby tears, again, not dwarf baby tears. This stuff can grow like a foot tall, okay, if you don't trim it back. So I think it's going to be a good little plant. We'll go ahead and add that in with the hair grass and see how it looks. I was originally thinking that we might do like some Monterey beach sand here in the front, or maybe even make a path here through the back, guys, but now that we have the hair grass in place and the foreground is looking a little bit more complete, I think we're gonna hold off for now. Let's just go ahead and do a water change here, get the water looking a little bit more clear, and then see how we like it. Water changes on all of my tanks upstairs is always pretty annoying. Gotta fill up the bucket here, and then take it downstairs, and then bring water back upstairs. Not an ideal situation, but it's just what we gotta do. Guys, here's something that is super important that I need to show you, okay? So we just drained the tank halfway down. I took a sample of this water because I wanted to check it for ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate. And I know most of you are gonna know that those are the important nitrogen compounds in the nitrogen cycle that we need to be aware of, but check this out. Ignore this, guys. It was a clean tube that was gonna be used for something else, but here we have an ammonia test, all right? And if we hold this up, and we do a comparison here, I think this is going to show pretty true on camera. We have somewhere between 1, maybe even 2 ppm ammonia. Where did that ammonia come from? We added in nitrifiers, remember? So shouldn't those solve the problem? They're not going to solve it overnight. The source of that ammonia is most definitely coming from all of this wood that we have in the tank. Whenever you add wood to an aquarium, especially fresh wood, you need to be careful of that ammonia spike. And that's basically just because the wood is now being introduced to organisms that are going to break down and mineralize ammonia, and that's why we're seeing a reading in the tank. And now you're probably wondering, Mike, you added in the beneficial bacteria that oxidize ammonia to nitrite and nitrite to nitrate, and the theory is that when you add that stuff, now the tank is safe for fish. So how come you're still seeing the ammonia? Hey guys, future me here. I had to refilm this because I went just way too far down a rabbit hole when I originally shot this. But anyway, long story short, after we filled the tank up and stopped for the night, we of course dechlorinated the water, and I also added some Fritz bacteria because it's always like a why not situation. It's always gonna help speed things up, kind of no matter what. The problem is though, is that when you have an aquarium with a super low pH like this one, 6.5, I mean that's kind of all of my tanks. Nitrification does not behave the same as it does at a pH of say 7.6 or higher, which that's what those organisms thrive in. We're not going to see the same kind of immediate and precise activity that we would at those higher pHs, and that's just biology. That's just the way it is. And what ends up happening to a lower pH aquarium is that it just sorts itself out. I hate to be like, I hate to say that because it sounds so unscientific and it sounds like, you know, nobody really knows what's going on, but that's kind of the truth. There's a lot of other stuff going on at these low pHs. The ammonia that you're reading on a test kit isn't really there, and that's, I don't know, that's probably, I'm going down the rabbit hole again, but so I'm gonna stop. But basically we're gonna wait until this aquarium sorts itself out because the wood is producing so much ammonia. And if you do a test kit and you're seeing ammonia in the tank, just hold off, wait until it goes away. It will go away. Add a culture of bacteria if you want. It will help to some degree, or, you know, transfer something from an existing tank. You know the drill. So anyway, I think this is like take 7. I'm done. Let's go back to the video. So after a 50% water change, guys, the tank is looking significantly more clear, but still has that little tinge to it. And that's just gonna be something we have to get used to here over the next few weeks. I added in this tiny little baby flamingo crib. Hopefully that does well there. And yeah, I mean, now we just gotta sit back and wait for our nitrogen to get in check. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more of the Fritz bacteria because why not? It'll just help things happen a little bit faster. But let's talk about it because I'm really excited about what we're going to be doing with this tank, guys. So we are not going to be doing just 1 betta fish or 2, like I said in the beginning of this video. I think we're going to be doing 3, if not 4 betta fish in this tank. And the only way we can do that is if we have all females. This is often referred to as a sorority tank, which I think is pretty hilarious. But it's gonna be my first time doing it, and I think it's gonna work out good. And the reason why is because the betta fish that I have planned to get are already coexisting together in the same tank. You just go out and buy, like, let's say 4 random female betta fish and put them together. I've heard that chances aren't great that they're all gonna get along. So if you can find a sorority that's already been together for a while, then the chances of them doing well together are really good. I did, however, notice that on Space City Fish and Coral, you guys know that I get betta fish from them from time to time. Richard came from them. I did notice that they had a couple sorority options on their website. So I'll put a link for them down in the description. You can go check that out. I'm not sure 100% how that whole thing works, if it's exactly what you see is what you get with those sororities, but if you're really interested, I'm sure you could send them a message and find out what's going on with that. Anyway, guys, I think that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're excited for when we get our beta fish sorority going in here. It's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be pretty cool. But if anything, you know, if you landed on this video and you were looking for a good beta tank tutorial, this is a pretty good one. Just make sure that you have a lid on your tank, because you never know who's going to be jumping. We got that. We have not a ton of sharp objects in here, and so, I mean, that pretty much covers it. Lots of plants. You want to have a good, nice planted habitat for them. They're going to really appreciate that. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, guys. Hit the notification bell. Hit the like button if you liked the video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.